In the North Cascades, Officer Emily Carter is dangling over a frozen ravine, not by a rope, by the hood of her jacket. Each gust tears the stitching. Each second feels like the last. Above her, 3 armed men watch in silence. She whispers a prayer because there's no radio, no rescue, no one coming. Then, a German shepherd's growl cuts through the blizzard. A veteran appears from the trees. Eyes haunted, hands steady-like. God sent him at the exact moment the thread is about to snap. But if he's 1 second late, she's gone. If you believe God still works miracles in the storm, comment Amen and subscribe for the full story. God bless you. The mountain did not care who you were. It did not care about badges, years of service, or the promises made to loved ones waiting at home. In the North Cascades, winter ruled with an ancient, indifferent hand one that crushed the careless and tested the determined without mercy. Officer Emily Carter knew this. She had trained for it, prepared for it, and still, the mountain found a way in. Snow whipped sideways across the ravine, stinging her face like needles. Her breath came out in sharp white bursts as she ran, boots pounding against frozen stone and crusted ice. Somewhere ahead, just beyond the bend of the narrow mountain trail, the suspect fled, boots slipping, breath ragged, panic loud enough to echo through the trees. "Police! Stop!" Emily shouted, though the wind tore her words apart before they reached him. The radio crackled uselessly at her shoulder. Static. No signal. The terrain here swallowed sound and technology alike, as if the mountain preferred secrets. She rounded the bend and everything went wrong at once. A gunshot rang out, not aimed to kill. A warning. The bullet struck rock near her feet, exploding stone and ice into the air. Emily skidded, arms flailing, boots scrambling for traction that wasn't there. Snow gave way beneath her weight, sliding like a living thing. The ground vanished. For half a heartbeat, she felt nothing at all. No fear, no sound, just weightlessness, as if the world had exhaled and forgotten to breathe her back in. Then pain snapped her into reality. Her body jerked violently, her neck wrenched backward. The air tore from her lungs in a strangled gasp as something yanked her to a sudden, brutal stop. Emily screamed. She dangled in open space, legs kicking uselessly, boots scraping against empty air. Below her, the ravine dropped away into a swirling abyss of fog, ice, and jagged rock, a fall that promised nothing but silence at the end. Above her head, she felt it. The hood of her winter police jacket was caught. A thick, dead tree branch jutted out from the cliff face like a skeletal arm, its bark split and frozen white. The fabric of her hood had snagged on a sharp knot in the wood, stretched tight, biting into her neck as it took her full weight. Her jacket groaned softly. That sound-low, tearing intimate was worse than the gunshot. "Oh, no," she whispered, her voice shaking. "No, no, no." Emily forced herself to go still. Training kicked in, sharp and unforgiving. Panic wasted energy. Panic killed. She wrapped one hand around the fabric near her collar, trying to reduce the strain, while the other clawed at empty air, searching for rock, for anything solid. There was nothing. Her body swayed gently with the wind, each movement pulling harder at the seams of the hood. She could feel individual stitches protesting, popping one by one like distant firecrackers. She looked up. The branch was old, brittle, frost-coated, and it was not meant to hold a human life. Above the ravine, boots crunched on snow. Emily froze. 3 figures appeared at the cliff's edge, dark against the white storm, faces hidden beneath hoods and scarves, rifles slung casually, as if they had all the time in the world. One of them laughed. "Well, I'll be damned," a man said, peering down at her. "Looks like the mountain caught you before we did." Emily lifted her chin despite the pain burning through her neck and shoulders. "Step back," she ordered, forcing authority into her voice. "I'm armed. You come any closer and—" "And what?" another voice interrupted, amused. "You gonna shoot us from down there?" They chuckled softly, unhurried. Not afraid. That scared her more than the fall. Emily's gloved fingers twitched toward her holster, then stopped. Her weapon was gone, torn free during the fall, lost to the ravine. The men noticed. Their smiles widened. One of them crouched, snow crunching beneath his weight, and leaned closer to the edge. "You really shouldn't have followed us out here alone, Officer Carter." Her blood ran cold. "How do you know my name?" "Because you've been a problem for weeks," he replied calmly. "And problems get handled." The wind howled, ripping between the cliffs like a living thing. The branch creaked. Emily felt the hood slip. Just a fraction, but enough. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She did the math instantly. The fabric wouldn't last long. Minutes, maybe less, especially if the men decided to hurry things along. "Listen to me," she said, her voice steady now, dangerous in its calm. "You don't want this on your conscience." One man shrugged. "Mountain accidents happen all the time." Another stepped forward, knife glinting faintly as he drew it from his belt. Emily's breath caught. "Don't." He knelt, stretching out carefully, blade angled toward the stretched fabric of her hood. Nothing personal. The blade moved closer. Somewhere far away beyond the ravine, beyond the storm, something shifted. A sound cut through the wind, low, distant, almost lost beneath the screaming gusts. A growl. The man with the knife paused. "You hear that?" Another scoffed. "Probably wolves." But the growl came again, closer this time, deeper, controlled. From the far ridge, partially hidden by blowing snow and twisted pines, a shape moved. Then another. A man stepped into view, tall and broad-shouldered, his movements efficient, deliberate. He wore a brown leather coat dusted with snow, a red and black plaid shirt visible beneath it. His face was rugged, weathered, eyes locked on the scene across the ravine with a sharpness that had nothing to do with curiosity. Beside him ran a German shepherd, black and tan fur bristling, ears pinned forward, muscles coiled with intent. The dog's gaze never left the men at the cliff's edge. Emily didn't see them yet. She was too busy fighting gravity, cold, and the slow, horrifying realization that the fabric holding her life was giving way, thread by thread. Above her, the men straightened. "Looks like we've got company," one muttered. The man in the leather coat stopped at the ridge, snow swirling around him like smoke. He took in the scene in seconds, the hanging officer, the ravine, the armed men, the fraying hood stretched to its breaking point. His jaw tightened. The dog growled again, low and lethal. The mountain held its breath, and Emily Carter hung between worlds, unaware that help had arrived, or that the next moments would decide who walked away from the ravine and who vanished into it forever. Lucas Reed had learned the hard way that mountains remembered things. They remembered footsteps long after snow buried them. They remembered gunfire long after echoes died. And they remembered men who thought they could leave violence behind just by walking in the opposite direction. The growl left Max's chest before Lucas consciously registered the danger. It was low, controlled, the sound of a warning, not an attack. Lucas stopped at the edge of the ridge, boots sinking into fresh snow. Wind cut across his face, sharp as broken glass. Below him, the ravine split the mountain clean in two, a deep, merciless scar filled with drifting fog and jagged stone. And there she was, a woman in a dark police jacket, suspended over nothing, her body twisted slightly with the wind, legs hanging uselessly. The hood of her jacket was stretched tight above her head, snagged on a dead branch jutting from the cliff like a cruel joke. Lucas could see the fabric pulling, thinning, fighting a battle it was never meant to win. 3 armed men stood above her. Lucas felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the same pressure he'd felt years ago in places with names no one back home cared to pronounce. The same cold clarity that came right before everything went loud and fast and irreversible. He hadn't planned to be here. He had come to the mountains for silence, for distance, for a life where the only decisions involved weather, firewood, and whether Max needed new boots before the next storm. But silence had never lasted long for him. "Easy," Lucas murmured, not sure whether he was speaking to the dog or himself. Max stood rigid at his side, muscles taut, ears locked forward. Snow dusted the fur along his spine, melting instantly from the heat beneath. His eyes never left the men across the ravine. One of them laughed. The sound carried easily in the cold air. Lucas felt something old and bitter rise in his throat. He scanned the terrain automatically, distance between ridges. Too far to shout, too far to cross quickly. The ravine was narrow in places, but here it dropped steep and sheer. A jump would be suicide. A charge would get the woman killed before he took 3 steps. He needed time. Time was the one thing the woman hanging by a thread didn't have. Lucas dropped to one knee behind a cluster of wind-twisted pines, pulling Max down with him. Snow puffed softly around them. "Stay," he whispered. Max didn't move, but his growl deepened, vibrating against Lucas's gloved hand. Lucas exhaled slowly, forcing his breathing to steady. Panic was loud. Panic made mistakes. He had buried too many friends who panicked. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and felt the familiar shape there. Small, hard, unassuming. A military-grade thermal flare. Old issue. Technically decommissioned. Practically forgotten. He hadn't meant to keep it. He just hadn't known how to let go of everything. Across the ravine, one of the men crouched near the edge. Lucas watched his posture, the casual way he held himself. Not law enforcement. Too loose. Another man adjusted his rifle, muzzle dipping slightly toward the hanging officer. Lucas's jaw clenched. "Okay," he whispered. "We do this smart." Max's ears flicked toward him, then back to the ravine. He understood tone, if not words. Understood danger better than most men Lucas had served with. Lucas glanced at the sky. Thick cloud cover, low visibility. But satellites still watched these mountains' fire spotting systems, forestry patrols, emergency monitoring. A thermal flare wouldn't bring help instantly, but it would mark the area, put eyes in the sky. It would also tell the men across the ravine that they were no longer alone. Lucas didn't like that part. He shifted slightly, careful not to silhouette himself. Snow crunched softly under his knee. The woman moved, just a little. Lucas's stomach dropped as the fabric of her hood stretched again, a faint tearing sound carried by the wind. One of the men noticed. "Well," the man said, standing, "looks like time's running out." The one with the knife stepped forward again. Lucas's world narrowed. He didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He triggered the flare. For half a second nothing happened. Then the ridge behind Lucas exploded in silent, searing heat. The thermal flare ignited with a bright, invisible bloom unseen by the naked eye, but screaming to anything watching from above. Max flinched at the sudden surge of energy, then steadied. Lucas rolled to his feet. "Max," he said quietly, "left." The German shepherd launched forward without hesitation, bounding down the slope at an angle that kept him hidden by terrain and trees. Snow sprayed beneath his paws, his dark form a moving shadow against white. Across the ravine, the men stiffened. "What the hell was that?" one of them snapped, scanning the ridgeline. Another cursed. "I saw something over there." Lucas didn't raise his weapon. He didn't shout. He did exactly what the men didn't expect. He stepped into view. Hands visible, posture relaxed. "Morning," Lucas called, his voice carrying clearly despite the wind. "Beautiful day to be standing too close to a cliff." All 3 men turned toward him. The knife paused inches from the woman's hood. Emily Carter looked up. For the first time since she'd fallen, she saw him, a stranger, tall, calm, standing where no one should have been standing. Hope flared, dangerous, unwelcome. "Don't move," one of the men shouted, raising his rifle. Lucas stopped, smiled faintly. "I wasn't planning to." His eyes never left the knife. "You cut that hood," Lucas said evenly, "and she dies. You know that." "So?" the man replied. "Not our problem." Lucas nodded, as if conceding a point. "Maybe. But the thing about mountains is, they don't keep secrets very well." He gestured vaguely behind him. "You set off something out here, people start looking. Rangers, state patrol, maybe a helicopter if you're unlucky." The men exchanged glances. Emily's arms burned. Her fingers were numb. She could feel nothing below her elbows. "Please," she said, her voice hoarse. "Don't." The man with the knife hesitated. That was all Lucas needed. A bark echoed from the left ridge, sharp, aggressive, impossibly close. "What?" Max burst from the trees, charging straight toward them, teeth bared, snow flying. One of the men fired instinctively, the shot going wide as Max veered at the last second. Chaos erupted. Lucas moved. He fired a single round not at a man, but at the rock face above them. The bullet struck frozen stone. The mountain answered. Ice cracked. Snow shifted. A slab broke free and thundered down between the men and the cliff edge, exploding into a cloud of white that forced them back, coughing and swearing. Emily screamed as the branch jerked violently, but held. For now. Lucas sprinted toward the ravine, heart pounding, the past roaring back into his ears like artillery fire. He skidded to a stop beside the tree, anchoring the branch, and dropped to his knees, hands already moving, looping rope around bark rough with age and frost. "Hang on!" he shouted down to her. "I've got you!" Emily's vision blurred with tears and snow. Above them, the men regrouped, weapons raised, anger replacing surprise. But they were no longer in control. The mountain had shifted sides. And Lucas Reed, a man who had sworn never to fight again, found himself right where he'd always been best, standing between the innocent and the fall. Cold did not arrive all at once. It crept. It crept into Emily Carter's fingers until they no longer felt like fingers, just distant ideas of them. It crept into her shoulders, where fire had burned moments ago and now turned dull and heavy. It crept into her thoughts, whispering lies about rest and stillness and how easy it would be to let go. She did not let go. The hood of her jacket was stretched so tight she could feel the fabric biting into the back of her neck. Each sway of her body was answered by a thin, treacherous sound threads complaining, stitching, surrendering one breath at a time. Below her, the ravine waited. Fog rolled through it in slow, circling currents, hiding the bottom like a secret the mountain intended to keep forever. Ice clung to the rock walls in jagged sheets. Somewhere far below, something cracked ice breaking free, or stone giving up its grip. It echoed upward like a warning. Then a voice cut through the wind. "Hang on, I've got you." Emily lifted her head. The man was kneeling at the cliff's edge now, bracing himself against a gnarled tree that looked nearly as old as the mountain itself. Snow coated his coat and darkened his hair. His hands moved with practiced speed, looping rope around the trunk, pulling it tight, checking the knot without looking twice. Not frantic, not rushed, controlled. "Don't move unless I tell you," he called down. "Your hood's holding for now." For now. Emily swallowed. Her throat burned. "It's tearing," she said. "I can feel it." "I know." He glanced at the branch, at the stretched fabric, at the way her weight pulled everything toward the breaking point. "We're going to transfer the load. Slow. Easy." A sharp bark echoed nearby. Emily flinched as something dark and fast streaked through her peripheral vision. The German Shepherd Max appeared at the edge of the snowslide that had fallen moments earlier, teeth bared, chest heaving, eyes fixed on the armed men struggling to reposition themselves on the unstable ground. One of the men shouted. Another fired a shot that went wide, the bullet vanishing into the ravine with a sound like tearing cloth. Lucas didn't look back. "Focus on me," he said firmly. "Eyes up here." Emily forced her gaze away from the men, away from the gunfire, away from the fog below. She locked onto Lucas's face. It was lined, scarred in places, not old exactly, but worn, like something that had been tested too many times and kept going anyway. "How bad is it?" she asked. Lucas didn't lie. "Bad enough that we don't rush." He fed the rope through his hands and clipped a carabiner onto a loop, then leaned over the edge just far enough to extend it downward. "I'm going to swing this toward you," he said. "When it touches your chest, wrap your arm through it. Not both. Just one." "I don't know if I can—" "You can," he cut in, voice steady but sharp now. "You don't need strength. You need timing." The rope swung. The wind caught it, pushing it away from her, teasing, cruel. Emily clenched her jaw as Lucas adjusted, compensating, guiding it closer, inch by inch. Another shot cracked behind him. Max lunged. Emily heard a man cry out in pain as the dog collided with him, weight and muscle slamming into his legs. They went down hard in the snow, weapons skittering away. "Max!" Lucas shouted, not as a command, but a warning. The dog disengaged instantly, backing off just enough to keep the man pinned without exposing himself. Teeth flashed inches from the man's throat. The other two regrouped, moving to flank. Lucas didn't turn. The rope brushed Emily's chest. "Now," Lucas said. Emily released one hand from the fabric at her collar. The sudden shift made the hood groan loudly, a long, ugly rip tearing partway through the seam. Emily gasped as her body dropped an inch, the force snapping her back against the air. "Now, Emily," Lucas barked. She thrust her arm through the loop and hooked it tight against her shoulder. "I've got it," she shouted. Lucas pulled, slow, steady. The rope took some of her weight, easing the strain on the hood. Emily felt it immediately. The pressure at her neck lessened, just enough to let her breathe again, but not enough. The branch creaked. Ice broke free above her, raining down into the ravine in glittering shards. "Okay," Lucas muttered. "Okay." He shifted his stance, digging his boots into the snow, wrapping the rope once around his forearm for leverage. His shoulders tensed as he took more of her weight. Across the clearing, one of the men raised his rifle again. Max snarled, low and savage. "Don't," Lucas said loudly, eyes never leaving the rope. "You fire another shot and that snow shell finishes what it started." The man hesitated. The mountain groaned beneath them, as if agreeing. Emily's vision blurred. She felt dizzy now, blood rushing back into her arm painfully. The cold seemed farther away, replaced by heat and pins and needles. "Emily," Lucas said, softer now, "listen to me. When I say drop the hood, you drop it. The rope will catch you." Her heart stuttered. "If it doesn't, it will." She wanted to believe him, wanted it desperately. Another gust of wind slammed into her, twisting her body. The hood jerked violently. There was a loud, final tearing sound. The fabric split. Emily screamed as the hood ripped free from the branch. For one terrifying fraction of a second, she fell. Then the rope snapped tight. Her body slammed against the rock wall, knocking the breath from her lungs, but she didn't keep falling. She dangled now from the rope, spinning slightly, the ravine still yawning beneath her, but farther away. Alive. Lucas grunted as the sudden weight nearly pulled him forward. He dropped to one knee, arms straining, teeth clenched. "I've got you," he shouted, more to himself than anyone else. Max barked sharply again. The remaining two men broke. One turned and ran down the slope, slipping and scrambling, fear finally outweighing greed. The other tried to grab his fallen companion, only to be met with Max's teeth snapping inches from his face. "Stay," Lucas commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. Max froze, perfectly still, eyes locked, a living barrier. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Emily heard them and sobbed, a broken, disbelieving sound. Lucas began hauling her up, inch by inch, using the tree as an anchor, every muscle in his body burning with effort. Snow fell from his coat in small avalanches as he leaned back, pulling her closer to solid ground. Emily reached the cliff edge at last. Strong hands grabbed her arms. Lucas hauled her the rest of the way up, rolling her onto the snow as the rope went slack. She lay there gasping, staring at the sky, alive. Lucas collapsed beside her, chest heaving. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Emily turned her head and looked at him. "You didn't hesitate," she said quietly. "Why?" Lucas stared out at the ravine, at the place where the hood still fluttered weakly from the branch, torn and useless. "Because I know what it looks like," he said, "when no one comes." Max trotted over and sat beside them, tongue lolling, eyes still sharp. The sirens grew louder. The mountain, for now, released its grip. The sirens did not bring peace. They brought urgency. Their distant wail cut through the mountain air like a promise that might still be broken if anyone hesitated too long. Emily Carter lay on her side in the snow. breath ragged, lungs burning, every muscle trembling with the aftershock of survival. The ground felt unreal beneath her, too solid, too forgiving after the endless pull of the ravine. Lucas Reed was already moving. He rose to one knee, scanning the slope below with the same cold precision he had used on the rope minutes earlier. The snowfield was churned in broken now boot prints, drag marks, the sharp gouge where a rifle had skidded away. One man lay pinned on his back, wrists twisted awkwardly, fear widening his eyes as Max stood over him, teeth bared but motionless. The other two were gone. "They split," Emily rasped, pushing herself up on her elbows. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, thin, scraped raw. One went down the east slope, the other he ran north. "Toward the tree line." Lucas nodded once. "I know." He crouched beside her, quick, efficient. "Can you stand?" Emily tested her legs. Pain flared, sharp but manageable. Nothing felt broken. "Yeah," she said. "I can move." "Good." He handed her back her sidearm, muddy, scratched, but intact. "You're not done yet." She looked up at him, surprised. "You're assuming I'd walk away." A corner of his mouth lifted. "I wasn't assuming." Another gunshot cracked somewhere below. Farther away this time, a warning shot or panic, hard to tell. Lucas's gaze hardened. "That's our clock." Emily forced herself upright, swaying slightly before steadying. Max glanced at her, ears flicking, then returned his attention to the man beneath him. "Stay," Lucas told the dog again, then looked at the captive. "You move, he bites. You fight, he bites harder." The man swallowed and nodded frantically. Emily pulled her radio from her vest. Static, then faint but real. "Unit 4, responding. Repeat signal received. Thermal marker confirmed." Emily's shoulders sagged with relief. "They saw your flare." Lucas didn't answer. He was already moving toward the slope, following the half-buried trail of disturbed snow that led away from the ravine. "You're not law enforcement," Emily said, catching up to him. "You don't have to do this." Lucas stopped, looked at her. "I know," he said simply. Then he kept walking. They moved fast but careful, picking their way along the ridge where the ground was firmer, less likely to betray them. The forest ahead grew thicker, darker, the trees closing ranks like an army that did not welcome pursuit. Lucas crouched and examined the tracks. "2 men," he murmured. "One limping. He took a fall when Max hit them." Emily nodded. "The one who ran north was their leader. He won't stop unless he has to." Lucas glanced at her. "And you?" "I don't stop either." That earned her a brief look of approval. They split just before the tree line. "I'll take the limping one," Lucas said. "He's heading for cover, but he's bleeding. You go north. Keep your distance. Don't corner him unless you have to." Emily hesitated. "You sure?" Lucas met her gaze, steady and unblinking. "I've tracked worse." She exhaled once. "Then don't get yourself killed." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I'll try not to." Emily turned and disappeared into the trees, weapon raised, senses sharp, despite the cold gnawing at her bones. Lucas shifted direction, moving down slope, body low, steps measured. The forest here was quieter, the snow thinner beneath the canopy. He could smell blood now, metallic, sharp. The man was close. A branch snapped. Lucas froze. Ahead, a shape stumbled between the trees, clutching his side. The man glanced back, panic etched deep, and raised his rifle with shaking hands. "Don't," Lucas said calmly, stepping into view. The rifle wavered. "Stay back." "You fire that thing," Lucas replied, "and you won't hit me. You'll hit the tree next to you, and the sound will bring every badge on this mountain down on your head." The man's breathing was loud, desperate. "I don't have a choice." Lucas advanced one step. "You always have a choice." The man screamed and fired. The shot went wide. Lucas moved. He closed the distance in 3 strides, knocking the rifle aside and driving his shoulder into the man's chest. They crashed into the snow together. The man clawed, swinging wild, but Lucas pinned his arm and twisted hard. There was a sharp crack. The man howled. Lucas didn't linger. He cuffed him with his own restraints and rolled him onto his stomach, breath steady, heart pounding with a rhythm he knew too well. "Stay down," he said quietly. "It's over." Elsewhere in the forest, Emily moved like a shadow. The man she followed was smarter. He covered his tracks when he could, doubled back twice, tried to lose her among the trees. But he was tired, and fear made people sloppy. She spotted him crouched behind a fallen log, reloading with numb fingers. "Police!" she shouted. "Drop the weapon!" He spun, firing blindly. Emily dove behind a tree as bark exploded inches from her face. She returned fire, not to kill, but to pin him, forcing him down. "Last warning," she called. "You don't walk out of here." The man laughed, a cracked, unhinged sound. "You already fell once today, officer." Emily gritted her teeth. "Not today." She flanked him, boots silent in the snow, heart hammering. When she emerged behind him, she didn't hesitate. She struck hard, disarming him, driving him face first into the ground. The fight was short, ugly, exhausting. When it ended, the man lay cuffed and furious, snow melting against his cheek. Emily stood over him, chest heaving. The sirens were close now, very close. Minutes later, the forest filled with movement uniforms, weapons, voices cutting through the quiet. Rangers secured the prisoners. Paramedics wrapped Emily in a blanket, checking her vitals despite her protests. Lucas stood apart, Max at his side, watching the operation with a distant, unreadable expression. Emily broke free of the medics and walked toward him. "They're all accounted for," she said. "Every one of them." Lucas nodded. "Good." She studied him for a moment. "You could have left." "So could you," he replied. She smiled faintly. "Guess neither of us are very good at that." A helicopter thudded overhead, snow swirling violently beneath its blades. As the mountain slowly released its hold, Emily realized something unsettling and true. The most dangerous part of the fall hadn't been the ravine. It had been the moment someone decided to step in front of it, and that choice had changed everything. By the time the last suspect was loaded into the Ranger transport, the storm had begun to loosen its grip, not retreating, just watching. Snow fell softer now, slower, drifting instead of slashing. The helicopter circled once above the tree line before banking away, its thunder fading into the clouds like a door closing on chaos. What remained was quieter, heavier, the kind of silence that came after violence, when the mountain decided whether to forgive. Emily Carter sat on the tailgate of a Ranger truck, a thermal blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Steam rose faintly from her breath and from the mug of bitter coffee pressed into her gloved hands. Her body ached in places she hadn't known could ache. Her neck throbbed where the hood had caught her. Her ribs protested every breath, but she was alive. Across the clearing, Lucas Reed stood with Max beside him, watching the scene unfold as if it belonged to someone else. Rangers moved past him without question now. Someone had handed him a cup of coffee, too. He hadn't touched it. Emily watched him for a long moment. He didn't look like a hero. No dramatic posture, no searching for praise, just a man standing slightly apart from the warmth, coat dusted white, eyes fixed on the trees as if expecting the mountain to speak back. She rose slowly and crossed the snow. "They found more weapons," she said, stopping beside him. "Hidden about a mile north, enough to supply half a militia." Lucas nodded. "That explains the urgency." "They would have killed me," she added quietly. "Yes," he said. No hesitation, no comfort wrapped around the truth. Emily swallowed. Why didn't they? Lucas finally looked at her. His eyes were steady but tired. Because they thought they had time. She exhaled a humorless laugh. Turns out they didn't. Max sat obediently at Lucas's side, tail sweeping the snow in slow arcs. Emily crouched and extended her hand. After a brief pause, the dog leaned in, pressing his broad head against her palm. Solid, warm, real. "Good boy," she whispered. Max accepted the praise with dignity. A ranger approached, clipboard tucked under his arm. "Mr. Reed," he said, "we'll need a statement, and you might want to stick around." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Am I in trouble?" The ranger hesitated. "No, but you set off a thermal flare registered on federal systems. That usually gets questions." Lucas nodded once. "I'll answer them." The ranger glanced at Emily, then back at Lucas. "After the medic clears her." Emily rolled her eyes. "I'm fine." The ranger smiled thinly. "That's what they all say." He walked away. Emily wrapped the blanket tighter. "You could have left before they showed up," she said again. "You had a clean exit." Lucas looked back toward the ravine, now partially hidden by drifting fog. The torn hood still fluttered weakly from the dead branch, a scrap of fabric waving like a surrender flag. "No," he said, "I didn't." She studied him. "Why?" Lucas took a breath, let it out slowly. "Because leaving never really works. It just delays the reckoning." Emily waited. "I left once," he continued, "after my last deployment. Walked away from everything. Thought if I buried myself far enough into the woods, the noise would stop." "And did it?" A faint smile touched his mouth. "The noise gets quieter, but it doesn't forget you." Emily nodded. She understood that better than she wanted to admit. A medic waved her over again, impatience clear. She grimaced. "I should go before they sedate me out of spite." Lucas huffed softly. "Probably wise." She hesitated, then extended her hand. Emily Carter. Lucas took it. His grip was firm, warm, despite the cold. "Lucas Reed." "Thank you," she said, "for not walking away." He released her hand gently. "You're welcome." "For not letting go." They shared a look, something unspoken, unfinished. Emily returned to the truck. As the medic checked her pupils and muttered about hypothermia, she glanced back toward the tree line. Lucas and Max were already moving. She frowned. "Where's he going?" A ranger followed her gaze. "Back to wherever he came from, I guess." Emily shook her head. "He'll freeze out there." The ranger shrugged. "Some people prefer the cold." Emily wasn't so sure. Night settled fast in the mountains. Lucas reached his cabin just as darkness swallowed the last of the pale sky. The structure stood small and stubborn among the trees, smoke curling weakly from the chimney. He unlatched the door and stepped inside, Max trotting past him without waiting for permission. The warmth hit him like a memory. Lucas shrugged off his coat and leaned it against the wall. He poured the untouched coffee down the sink, rinsed the mug, and stood there for a long moment with his hands braced against the counter. The adrenaline drained away, leaving behind the familiar ache. He sat heavily at the small wooden table and rested his head in his hands. Max padded over and nudged his knee with a wet nose. "I know," Lucas murmured. "I know." The image returned uninvited. The hood tearing, the sudden drop, the weight snapping tight against the rope. For a fraction of a second, he'd been sure he was too late. He hadn't felt that fear in years. Lucas straightened and stared into the low fire crackling in the hearth. "We don't get to choose when it comes back," he said softly. "Only what we do when it does." Max settled at his feet, chin on his paws. Hours later, headlights cut through the trees. Lucas stiffened. A vehicle crunched to a stop outside. A knock sounded at the door firm, official. Lucas opened it to find Emily standing on his porch, bundled in borrowed ranger gear, cheeks flushed from the cold. "You're not very hard to find," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't hiding." She smiled faintly. "Good, because I'm not done asking questions." "Come in," he said, stepping aside. She hesitated only a second before entering. The cabin was modest, functional. No decorations, no photographs, just tools, maps, and a life pared down to essentials. "You live alone," she observed. Lucas shrugged. "Mostly?" Max wagged his tail. Emily knelt to pet him, then stood and met Lucas's gaze. Internal Affairs is going to ask why a civilian had military-grade gear. And what will you tell them? Lucas asked. The truth, she said, that the mountain doesn't care about paperwork. And neither do I. Lucas studied her for a long moment. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. The mountain remembered everything. And for the first time in a long while, Lucas Reed didn't feel the need to forget. Morning arrived quietly, as if the mountain were trying not to wake anyone who had earned their rest. A thin gray light seeped through the cabin windows, catching on frost etched along the glass. The fire in the hearth had burned down to glowing embers, breathing warmth into the small room in slow, patient pulses. Outside, the storm had moved on, leaving behind a world scrubbed raw and honest. Lucas Reed woke before the light fully settled. He lay still for a moment, listening to the creak of the cabin as it adjusted to the cold, to the faint hiss of wind through the pines, to the steady rhythm of Max's breathing near the door. Peaceful sounds, deceptive ones. He swung his feet to the floor and stood, joints stiff, muscles sore in the familiar way that followed adrenaline and effort. As he reached for his coat, a voice spoke behind him. "You always wake up like this?" Lucas turned. Emily Carter stood near the table, hair pulled back, jacket unzipped, a steaming mug cradled in her hands. She looked better than she had any right to. Color back in her cheeks, eyes sharp despite the fatigue shadowing them. "You're early," he said. She shrugged. "Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I was falling." Lucas nodded. "That passes." "Does it?" she asked. He didn't answer. Max lifted his head and wagged his tail once, acknowledging her presence before settling again. Emily smiled faintly at the dog, then looked back at Lucas. "They cleared you," she said. "At least officially. The flare, the rope, the timing, it all checked out. You saved a life." Lucas poured coffee into a chipped mug and leaned against the counter. "I didn't do it alone." "No," Emily agreed. "But you were the one who stepped forward." She hesitated, then continued. "They also found something else." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't sound good." "They pulled data from the suspect's gear. GPS logs, satellite phones." She took a sip of coffee. "There's a second drop site, not far from here." Lucas straightened. "Another cache?" "And a handler," Emily said. "Someone who didn't show up yesterday, someone smart enough to stay out of sight." The warmth in the cabin seemed to dim. Lucas set his mug down slowly. "You're telling me this because I'm not supposed to be here," Emily finished. "I'm on medical leave, and you're not supposed to get involved." Max stood, ears pricked, sensing the shift. "But?" Lucas asked quietly. Emily met his gaze. "But the mountain doesn't care about orders, and neither does the man who almost let me fall." Silence settled between them. Lucas rubbed a hand over his jaw. "You're asking me to go back out there." "I'm asking you to help make sure no one else ends up hanging from a branch," she replied. Lucas looked toward the window, toward the endless white beyond it. He thought of the ravine, of the tearing sound, of the weight snapping tight in his hands. "I didn't come here to be useful," he said. "I came here to disappear." Emily's voice softened. "You didn't?" The words landed heavier than she intended. Lucas exhaled slowly. "What do you know about the handler?" "Not enough," Emily admitted. "But enough to know he's still watching, waiting for the right moment." Lucas nodded. "Then he won't expect us to move today." A flicker of determination crossed her face. "You're in?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Max barked once, sharp and eager. Lucas sighed. "Traitor." They moved by mid-morning. Emily had insisted on checking in with the Rangers first off the record, unofficial. A nod, a warning, nothing more. The kind of clearance that existed only in shared glances and unspoken trust. The trail they followed wound north, skirting the ravine before dipping into denser forest. Snow lay deep here, undisturbed except by animal tracks and the faint impressions left by men who believed no one would follow. Lucas moved with ease, reading the ground the way others read books. Emily watched him work, noting how he slowed at certain bends, how he listened more than he looked. "You ever think about coming back?" she asked quietly as they walked. "To what?" Lucas replied. She shrugged. "To everything?" Lucas considered the question. "Sometimes," he said. "Then I remember why I left." Emily nodded. "I get that." They stopped at the edge of a clearing. Lucas crouched, brushing snow aside to reveal a faint indentation. "There," he said. "Recent. Heavy load." Emily scanned the tree line. "Ambush territory." "Exactly," Lucas said. "Which means he wants to be seen." Max growled softly. A voice carried from the trees. "You two are persistent." Emily raised her weapon instantly. Lucas didn't move. A man stepped into the clearing, hands visible, expression calm. He was older than the others, leaner, smarter. His eyes flicked briefly to Max, then back to Lucas. "You should have walked away," the man said. Lucas tilted his head. "I tried that once. Didn't take." The man smiled thinly. "People like us don't get to retire." Emily tightened her grip. "Drop whatever you're holding." The man chuckled. "You already won. The weapons are gone." Lucas's eyes narrowed. "You're lying." "Am I?" The man took a step back. "Ask yourself why I'm here." The answer came too fast. "Distraction," Emily breathed. The world erupted. A shot cracked from the tree line. Snow exploded near Emily's feet. Lucas lunged, shoving her behind a fallen log as Max tore forward, barking furiously. "Move!" Lucas shouted. They ran. Branches clawed at them as they plunged into the trees, gunfire snapping behind them. Lucas ducked and weaved, dragging Emily through cover, his mind racing. "He's hurting us," Emily gasped. "Toward the ravine," Lucas confirmed. They burst into open ground. The handler stood at the far edge, rifle raised, smile gone. "Debt's paid," he said. "Now it's even." Lucas didn't think. He threw the coil of rope. Max leapt. The rope wrapped around the man's arm as Max slammed into his legs, taking him down hard. The rifle skidded away, disappearing into the snow. Emily was on him in seconds, cuffs snapping shut around his wrists. The man lay there, breathing hard, eyes cold. "You don't win," he said. "You just survive longer." Lucas looked down at him. "That's enough." Sirens echoed again, closer this time. Emily stood, chest heaving, adrenaline flooding her veins. She looked at Lucas, something fierce and grateful in her eyes. "We did it," she said. Lucas nodded, exhaustion settling in. "For now." As the rangers arrived and took the handler away, Emily glanced toward the ravine, visible through the trees. "Funny," she said softly. "I thought surviving meant being done." Lucas watched the mountain, ancient and unyielding. "Surviving," he replied, "is just the beginning." Max sat between them, tail thumping against the snow. The debt of survival had been paid, but the mountain was still listening. The mountain did not celebrate. It never did. When the rangers led the handler away in cuffs, his boots dragging shallow scars across the snow, the forest closed behind him without ceremony. No applause, no release. Just the soft hiss of falling snow and the distant echo of engines fading down the ridge. Emily Carter watched until the last shape disappeared among the trees. Only then did her hands begin to shake. She tucked them into her jacket pockets, angry at herself for the weakness, but Lucas saw it anyway. He always did. He had lived long enough to recognize the delayed tremor, the body's way of collecting the bill after danger had passed. "You okay?" he asked. Emily nodded automatically. Then she stopped, exhaled, and tried again. "I don't know." Lucas accepted that answer. He turned his attention to Max, who sat alert but calm, ears rotating slowly as if tracking sounds no one else could hear. The dog's chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, grounding the moment. The handler was gone. The weapons were secured. The mountain, for now, had been answered. That was when the truth arrived. A ranger jogged up the slope, breath fogging the air. "Officer Carter," he called. "They want you at the command post. Now!" Emily stiffened. "What's wrong?" The ranger hesitated. The handler talked. Lucas felt a familiar tightening behind his ribs. "What did he say?" Emily asked. "That yesterday wasn't the end," the ranger replied. "It was cleanup." The word hung between them like a dropped weapon. The command post was a temporary scar carved into the forest floodlights. Vehicles, radios crackling with voices that carried exhaustion and urgency in equal measure. Emily stood inside a canvas tent while maps were spread across a folding table. "The handler confirmed 2 more couriers," the incident commander said. "They're mobile, no fixed site, and they know this terrain." Emily leaned over the map. "Routes? Unclear, but there's a window, narrow." Lucas stood just outside the tent, listening. He didn't need the details to understand the shape of the problem. He'd seen it before. When the net closed on one threat, others slipped through the gaps. Emily emerged minutes later, jaw set. "They're moving tonight," she said, using the storm cover left behind. Lucas looked toward the darkening sky. Clouds thickened again, rolling low and fast. "You're not cleared." "I know. And they won't wait." "No." They stood there, neither speaking the decision out loud. Max rose, sensing the shift. He stepped between them, looking from one face to the other. Lucas crouched and rested a hand on the dog's shoulder. "This isn't your job," he said to Emily, voice low. "You've done enough." Emily met his gaze. "So have you." He smiled without humor. "That's never stopped anyone like us?" A distant rumble rolled through the mountain's thunder, or something heavier breaking loose. The forest darkened, as if the world itself were deciding to complicate matters. Emily turned back toward the tent, then stopped. "If we don't move now, they vanish, and someone else pays for it later." Lucas looked at the map again in his mind, at the choke points, the narrow passes, the places where sound died and mistakes multiplied. "Then we don't chase," he said. "We wait where they have to pass." They reached the pass at dusk. It was a narrow saddle between 2 steep slopes, wind-scoured and treacherous, the kind of place men avoided unless they had no choice. Snow had been blown clean from the center, leaving exposed ice like glass. On either side, drifts piled high, soft and deceptive. Lucas checked the wind. "They'll come from the west." Emily adjusted her position behind a fallen log, rifle steady. "You're sure?" "They don't like the trees," Lucas replied. "Too many angles, too many places to disappear." Max crouched low between them. Silent now, a shadow pressed into snow. Time stretched. Minutes passed. Then more. Emily's breath slowed. Her thoughts drifted back to the ravine, the sound of fabric tearing, the weightlessness before the rope caught. She clenched her jaw, forcing herself back into the present. A shape moved, then another. 2 figures emerged from the white, heads down, packs heavy, steps cautious. They moved like men who knew they were hunted but believed they were clever enough to avoid the trap. Lucas raised his hand. Emily waited. The men reached the center of the pass. Lucas dropped his hand. "Now," he whispered. Max exploded forward. The first courier shouted in surprise as the dog hit him low, taking out his legs. The second swung his rifle wildly too late. Emily fired, shattering ice at his feet. He slipped, crashed hard, and didn't get up. Lucas moved like gravity itself inevitable. He disarmed the first man and drove him face first into the snow, pinning him before the shock could wear off. "Don't," Lucas said calmly, pressing a knee into the man's back. "Just don't." The second courier groaned, clutching his shoulder where he'd struck the ice. Emily approached carefully, weapon trained, breath steady despite the adrenaline screaming through her veins. "It's over," she said. The man laughed weakly. "You think this ends it?" Emily didn't answer. The mountain answered for her. A deep, hollow crack rolled through the pass. Lucas looked up sharply. "Move!" The snowpack above them shifted slow at first, then with terrifying certainty. A slab broke free, sliding, gathering mass and speed as it came. "Avalanche!" Emily shouted. Lucas grabbed the downed courier's collar and shoved him toward the rock wall. "Get in," he barked. Max was already running. They dove for cover as the snow roared past, a living wall that swallowed sound and light. Ice and debris battered the rocks, shaking the ground beneath them. Then silence. Emily lay pinned against stone, heart hammering. She tasted blood and snow. When she pushed herself upright, the pass was transformed, buried, smoothed over, erased. Lucas coughed and rolled to his knees. He checked Max first, hands running over fur and muscle until he was sure. The dog shook himself violently, then stood, uninjured. Emily released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They'd survived again. The Rangers arrived minutes later, alerted by the shots and the avalanche sensors. The couriers were taken away, shaken and silent. The mountain had closed the door behind them. Night settled fully this time. Back at the command post, the incident commander approached Lucas and Emily together. "It's done," he said. "All assets secured, no more movement detected." Emily nodded. Relief washed through her, heavy and delayed. Lucas felt it too, and beneath it, something else. A weight. Not fear, not regret. Responsibility. Later, when the camp had quieted and the machine slept, Emily found Lucas at the edge of the trees. "You could leave now," she said softly. "No one would question it." Lucas watched the darkness between the pines. "I know. And will you?" He thought of the ravine, the rope, the pass, the avalanche that had nearly rewritten everything. "I don't think walking away means what I thought it did," he said. Emily smiled faintly. "Welcome back." Max leaned against Lucas's leg, solid and warm. The mountain did not speak. But it remembered, and so did they. The mountain looked different in the morning, not kinder, not softer, just honest. Sunlight spilled over the ridgeline in pale gold, catching on the new avalanche field like a sheet of hammered silver. The storm's last breath drifted away in thin veils, and the pines stood still for once, as if they were tired of arguing with the wind. Emily Carter stood at the edge of the command post with a paper cup of coffee and a bruise blooming purple beneath her jaw where the rock had kissed her too hard. She watched Rangers fold tents, coil cables, and load equipment with the quiet efficiency of people who had seen worse nights and survived them anyway. Across the clearing, the suspects were being transported out, heads down, hands cuffed, their bravado stripped away by cold, fear, and the mountain's indifference. For the first time in days, Emily let herself believe it was over. Then she heard the soft crunch of boots behind her. Lucas Reed approached without hurry, Max padding at his side. The dog's coat gleamed in the new light, black and tan fur dusted with frost that sparkled like tiny stars. Max looked pleased with himself in that wordless way dogs did, like he had personally rearranged the universe to ensure his people stayed breathing. Emily tried not to smile. She failed. "You're still here," she said. Lucas shrugged. "They haven't told me to leave." "They won't," she replied. "Half the camp thinks you're some kind of wilderness guardian now." Lucas's mouth twitched. "Great. Next I'll be expected to haunt the trees and warn hikers away from cliffs." Max huffed, as if offended the job description didn't include snacks. The laugh felt like sunlight on skin after too many hours of cold. Lucas watched her carefully. "That okay?" Emily nodded. "Yeah." Then, more quietly, "It's been a while since I remembered I could." Lucas didn't push. He never did. He simply stood beside her and let the mountain's mourning do what it could. A ranger called her name from the far truck. Emily lifted a hand in acknowledgement, then turned back to Lucas. "They want my statement," she said. "Final report. Whole chain of events." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "You going to tell them everything?" Emily stared into her coffee for a moment, then looked up. "I'll tell them what matters." "And what's that?" Emily gestured toward the ravine in the distance, still scarred and glittering. "That a civilian saved an officer's life and helped stop a weapons ring." Lucas nodded. "That's mostly true." Emily's smile sharpened. "And that your dog has better discipline than half the deputies in this county." Max sat proudly, tail thumping once. Lucas sighed. "He'll let it go to his head." Emily's expression softened. "What happens to you now, Lucas?" The question wasn't casual. It wasn't small talk. It was a rope thrown across a gap. Lucas looked toward the trees beyond camp. A line of tracks led back into the forest, his tracks, Max's tracks. The same route he had walked for years, believing it was the only one that didn't end in loss. "I go back to the cabin," he said. "Fix the fence, chop wood, try to pretend the world ends at my tree line." Emily waited. Lucas's gaze stayed on the distant ridge. "And then I don't," he added. Emily's breath caught. "You don't have to carry this alone," she said, voice low. Lucas turned to her. "That's the thing," he replied. "I thought being alone was how you stop losing people." Emily swallowed. "And now?" Lucas looked down at Max, who stared back with calm certainty, as if the answer had always been obvious. "Now I'm starting to think being alone is just another kind of falling," Lucas said. Emily nodded slowly. The words landed in her chest like a truth she had been avoiding. A gust of wind lifted snow from the ground in glittering swirls, playful now, almost harmless. It wrapped around them like a brief, cold blessing and moved on. A ranger approached with a clipboard. "Officer Carter, we're ready when you are." Emily straightened, professional mask sliding back into place. "Be right there." The ranger glanced at Lucas. "And you, sir, Mr. Reed, someone from the county will want a word. Paperwork, commendation, that kind of thing." Lucas's expression darkened slightly. "Commendation?" Emily smirked. "Careful, they'll give you a plaque." Lucas deadpanned. "If they engrave my name wrong, I'm disappearing again." Max sneezed loudly, like a laugh in dog language. Even the ranger smiled. When the ranger walked away, Emily turned back to Lucas. "Come with me," she said. Lucas blinked. "To the statement?" "To the next part," she corrected gently. "The part where you stop living like the only way to survive is to vanish." Lucas's jaw tightened. He looked toward the trees again, toward the cabin waiting in silence. The cabin had been safe, predictable. It had asked nothing of him except endurance. Emily asked more. So did the world. "I'm not good at returning," Lucas said. Emily's smile softened, almost sad. "Neither was I, until I ran out of places to hide." Lucas let out a slow breath. In it, something loosened something he'd been gripping for years without realizing it had been strangling him. Max rose and nudged Lucas's hand, then looked toward Emily and back again, tail wagging once, firm as a verdict. Lucas stared at the dog. "You planned this," he muttered. Max's eyes said, "Obviously." Emily laughed again, and this time it held warmth. Lucas shook his head. "Fine," he said. "I'll come for the paperwork." Emily lifted a brow. "Just the paperwork?" Lucas met her gaze, and for once he didn't look away. "And maybe," he admitted, "I'll stop pretending I'm not part of this world." Emily's throat tightened. She nodded once, as if accepting a pact. They walked toward the command tent together, boots crunching in snow that would soon melt and become water and vanish into the earth like all things did. The mountain watched them go, ancient and unmoved, as if it had merely tested a theory and found it true. Inside the tent, Emily began her statement. She spoke of the ravine, the suspects, the avalanche, the dog, the rope, the choices. She did not call Lucas a hero. She called him what he was. "A man who decided," she said, voice steady, "that leaving wasn't the same as living." Lucas listened without speaking, hands in his pockets, shoulders squared in the way men stood when they were trying not to be seen trembling. When the statement ended, the commander nodded solemnly. "You did good work, officer." Emily glanced at Lucas. "We did," she corrected. Outside, the sun climbed higher. The snow began to soften at the edges, dripping in slow, rhythmic taps from branches and tent lines, like the mountain was counting time again. Life resumed, stubborn and ordinary. Emily stepped out into the light and looked back at Lucas. "So," she said, "when you fix that fence, don't be surprised if you find footprints leading back to your porch." Lucas blinked. "You threatening to visit?" Emily smiled. "I'm warning you." Lucas huffed, almost amused. "Bring coffee." "I will," Emily said. "And maybe if you're brave enough, you'll tell me what you've been running from." Lucas looked at Max, who wagged his tail like the world had already forgiven him. Then Lucas looked at Emily. "Maybe," he said quietly, "I'll tell you what I've been running toward." They stood there for a moment, not touching, not needing to. Two survivors on the edge of a new beginning, with a dog between them and a mountain behind them, watching, remembering, and, in its own indifferent way, letting them go. Because even the coldest places on earth could witness something warmer than fear. And sometimes, when the snow finally melted, what remained was not the scar, but the choice to keep walking anyway. At the end of the story, when the snow melts and the helicopter's roar has faded into the distance, the mountain still stands there like an ancient god, cold, silent, yet not without meaning. And within that silence, there is something everyone can feel, even if no one can touch it. Miracles don't always fall like lightning. Sometimes they arrive as a rope, a single bark, and one person who refuses to turn away. Emily had been hanging over the abyss, held only by a fragile hood thin as a person's faith on the darkest days. But at the exact moment she needed it most, God sent the feet that were needed. A veteran carrying wounds from the past, and a loyal dog, faithful like a living prayer. Some people call that luck, but there are moments when luck isn't enough to explain what happens. Because when a tired heart still chooses to save a stranger, when a four-legged soul throws itself into danger without asking for praise, when death is inches away and still gets stopped, that's when people see God's hand working quietly in the shadows. And the message of this story isn't found in the gunshots or in the criminals being cuffed. It's found in something smaller, more ordinary. Every day, each of us has our own cliff edge. Some people hang there because of illness, some because of debt, some because of loneliness, some because of loss. And sometimes what holds us isn't strength, it's faith. A call at the right time, a friend knocking on the door, a simple "I'm here," or a hug that asks for no reason. If today you feel tired, remember this: God doesn't always remove the storm right away, but He often sends someone at the perfect moment to pull you back up, to remind you that you are still worth living, worth loving, worth beginning again. And if this story touched your heart, let it become a small flame that warms someone else. May God bless you and your family. May He protect those walking through the winter seasons of their lives, heal the wounds no one can see, and guide the hearts that feel lost. If you believe in miracles, comment Amen below and share this story with a friend who needs hope. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next stories. Stories of love, redemption, and the miracles God is still quietly working every single day. God bless you.